Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from NASA's Kennedy Space Center. I'm Will Robinson Smith. I'll be conducting our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at KSC. We appreciate you spending part of your weekend with us. Hope you've had a nice and restful couple of days as you get ready to kick back into the work week or school week tomorrow, whatever that may be. I'm glad you're here starting us off. The launch of a Falcon 9 rocket set to lift off from Historic Launch Complex 39A, T-minus 58 minutes, 22 seconds. Our Stephen Young, editor of Spaceflight Now, running the technical operations of the broadcast. Our Adam Bernstein is down at Starbase. You may have seen some of his photos that we've shared on our X, formerly Twitter feed, or perhaps on his. Our Michael Caine has this afternoon off, but you can follow the fellows on their handles. Adam is at ABurnNYC, Michael Caine at MD Caine Jr. While you're there, be sure to follow Spaceflight Now, simply at Spaceflight Now. We are also on Threads as well as Facebook if you are not on X yourself. As we're getting rolling here, I want to thank the more than 1,300 of you who are joining with us live as we're beginning our live commentary here today. If you haven't already, be sure to click that like button if you would be so kind. It allows the YouTube algorithm to do its thing and bring this live coverage to more folks as we continue on, and that is very much appreciated. Also want to thank our wonderful moderators hanging out with us today. I see Clisty Lee, Astro Jen, Astro Joe. Saw Rusty Shackelford earlier today over on Launchpad Live. Appreciate him. And we'll keep an eye out for any of the other mods that may be popping in during the next hour. If you do happen to see any of the other mods join us, be sure to give them a big old Spaceflight Now hello. Also want to thank our wonderful channel member community for making this live launch coverage possible. So thanks to folks like the Rocket Girl, Cumulus Granatus, Sulfur for Lunch, Victoria Larkin, Jacques Merd, X Aaron, and James Manahan, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments here in 4K. T-minus 53 minutes, 40 seconds and counting. In addition to the pre-launch activity today, SpaceX has been busy, well, quite literally coast to coast. Of course, this Falcon 9 rocket getting ready to launch in less than an hour. Coming up tomorrow afternoon, SpaceX has a launch on behalf of the Indian Space Agency, ISRO. We'll talk much more about that when we get to that launch tomorrow. In the overnight hours, there is a Falcon 9 rocket getting to send another batch of Starlink satellites up to low Earth orbit. And of course, down at Starbase in southern Texas, lots of hustle and bustle. You see lots of those tankers refilling the storage tanks as SpaceX performed a wet dress rehearsal tanking test on its Starship rocket earlier today, which you can see still fully stacked at Pad 1 down there at Starbase. Our own Adam Bernstein been hard at work, popping all over the place, getting lots of photos and some video for us as we're preparing for this Flight 6 of SpaceX's Starship program. This camera review brought to us by our friends over at Lab Padre. We'll be partnering with them once again for live coverage of the launch of Starship Flight 6, which is currently targeting Tuesday, November 19th, with a 30-minute window that opens up at 4 p.m. Central Time, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2200 UTC. And that is to allow the ship upper stage, S-31, it's the tail number on that, to have a daytime splashdown in the Indian Ocean, unlike the previous launches. So look forward to hopefully getting some good live pictures as SpaceX tries to perform another propulsive landing in the Indian Ocean using its ship upper stage. Also looking for the launch tower, which SpaceX calls Megazilla, to perform another catch of the Super Heavy booster. That's B-13 out there. Looking for a repeat of last time, hopefully with a bit more confidence going into it. As you may have heard in some audio published by Elon Musk or seen in our either article or video here on YouTube, there was some concern up to the last moment that they may not be able to move forward with the catch. With some interesting insight. You can go ahead and listen to some of that audio. It's within our story, both the written article and the video here on YouTube. So you can go back and check that out at your convenience. Do see one of our other moderators, Mark Otto, has popped in. Good to see you, Mark. Last bit of housekeeping. If you have a comment or question about this mission or other happenings in the realm of space, you can go ahead and use the YouTube Super Chat feature. And you'll be giving us not only a bit of support, but some interesting things to talk about as we continue on with our program here, and that is always much appreciated. Speaking of which, I want to thank James Castile for a $12 Super Chat. Thank you, sir. Who says, special thoughts and prayers to my niece, Jessica. Go Spaceflight now, go SpaceX. We'll keep Jessica in our thoughts as well. Also want to thank one of our wonderful channel members, Larry Mask, for a $5 Super Chat. Thank you, Larry. Currently at T-minus 49 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. Got a little more than 10 minutes between now and when the SpaceX launch director needs to make the call on the start of propellant load for today's Falcon 9 flight. Before we get to that point, let's go ahead and take a look at the countdown timeline and the sequence of events that we are anticipating in a nominal countdown scenario. T-minus 38 is the general time when the SpaceX launch director gives the go-ahead to proceed with prop load. SpaceX does its poll electronically, so if they are in a good position, they can do that ahead of this mark, but that's generally speaking when it happens. Once the green light is given for fueling, tanking begins at the T-minus 35-minute mark with the loading of RP1, or a rocket-grade kerosene, on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages, as well as liquid oxygen starts to flow aboard the Falcon 9's first stage. T-minus 30 minutes, they start loading cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage. The helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Same is true on the second stage, a few minutes thereafter. T-minus 23 minutes, the loading of second stage RP1 concludes. T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when the Strongback chill-down process begins. It's when SpaceX begins to thermally condition the feed lines ahead of second stage LOX load. We see that visually represented with the so-called big vent. It comes up right about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. That lasts until about T-minus 16 minutes and 30 seconds ahead of second stage LOX load. Moving on down, T-minus 7 minutes is when the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines gets underway. That process involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, and it helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes before flight, the first stage kerosene tank is full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, the Strongback retract sequence begins. It starts with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the Strongback, otherwise known as the transporter erector, reclines about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. It stays in that position until liftoff, at which point it pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes before launch, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Same is true on the second stage about a minute later. At that point, the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks brought up to flight pressure. We'll hear both of those events wrapped up in the singular call-out that the Falcon 9 is in startup. 45 seconds out, the SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlin 1D engines are healthy and ignite, the flight computer will give the command for the hold-down clamps to release the bird to soar at the T0 mark, which again for this mission is targeting 4:29 p.m. Eastern. That's 21:29 UTC. T-minus 45 minutes, 56 seconds. Now T-minus 44 minutes and counting. Coming into this mission, the most recent flight for SpaceX brought its total number of Falcon launches up to 112 so far this year. SpaceX has been picking up its launch pace now that it has no more missions to the International Space Station lifting off from Pad 39A, no more Falcon Heavies on the docket, which means that this launch pad can start churning out launches at a much more rapid clip. It also means that SpaceX doesn't have a 24-hour stand down ahead of a launch of mission to the ISS, an agreement that it has with NASA. So even if it had, like, for instance, a Starlink mission over on Pad 40, but a Dragon mission on 39A, they would have to wait until after Dragon goes once they get within a 24-hour bubble. Well, that time consideration no longer a factor now, so things will really start to drive up. SpaceX officials believe they can potentially reach 136 missions before the end of the year at the pace that they are ramping up to now. This chart, of course, also includes Falcon Heavy launches, so there have been 110 Falcon 9 flights in 2024, 2 Falcon Heavies. At this point in the afternoon, the Brevard County Emergency Operations Center, the EOC over Florida's Space Coast, has activated in support of this mission. One of the busiest EOCs in the country. They bring their folks together in support of all launch-related activities like static fires or the launches themselves. In the event that there were an emergency that could potentially affect the public, they have multiple agencies standing by at the ready to respond quickly. Of course, EOC busy not only because of the launch activities here at the Cape, but also just because we live in the state of Florida. And of course, we are susceptible to hurricanes and other natural disasters that may need responding to, especially during this time of the year. We are, however, so tantalizingly close to the end of hurricane season. And hopefully we will end the 2024 hurricane cycle on a bit of a lighter note. And it can just fizzle out. We can go into the holidays not thinking about hurricanes. Currently T-minus 39 minutes, 51 seconds and counting. Speaking of the weather, the 45th Weather Squadron forecast a pretty optimal launch weather forecast for today's flight. They issue their final public-facing forecast a day before a mission goes. So yesterday, they issued their forecast for today, which suggests a greater than 95% chance of favorable weather for liftoff. Only watch item being the cumulus clouds, which, of course, you can see in this wide shot here. The booster recovery weather is tracking in the low to moderate frame on a scale of low to moderate to high. If for whatever reason SpaceX is unable to launch this mission today, they do have a 24-hour backup opportunity with a nearly 2-hour window that opens up at the same time, 4:29 p.m. Eastern, 21:29 UTC. In that circumstance, the weather at liftoff still the same, greater than 95% favorable. Slight liftoff winds tracking between 7 and 12 miles per hour. The boost recovery weather improves slightly in that scenario. We'll talk a little bit more about the trajectory in just a little bit, but just to broadly tease to it, this Falcon 9 rocket is a mission targeting geosynchronous transfer orbit, meaning it's heading out due east once it leaves the pad here. SpaceX has its drone ship A Shortfall of Gravitas on tap to support this mission today. Its other drone ship, just read the instructions, is standing by ready to support the GSAT N2 mission. Another geosynchronous transfer orbit launch. That one lifting off from Space Launch Complex 40. Now T-minus 37 minutes, 21 seconds and counting. At this point in time, the SpaceX launch director should have made the call on the start of prop load for this mission. And as I let those words slip my mouth, we actually have a new T0. Again, SpaceX has a nearly 2-hour window for this mission, so they are now currently targeting 4:48 p.m. Eastern. 4:48 p.m. Eastern, that is 21:48 UTC. An adjustment of just a hair under 20 minutes. So we'll be adjusting our countdown clocks accordingly. Now T-minus 55 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. Now T-minus 49 minutes, 32 seconds and counting. For those who are just joining us, you may have noticed the clock no longer lining up with the launch at 4:29 p.m. Eastern. That's because SpaceX has adjusted to the right the liftoff time of the Optus-X mission, dubbed TD7 by SpaceX. Liftoff now 4:48 p.m. Eastern, 21:48 UTC. Do want to thank a few folks in the live chat who've been kind enough to support us with this live launch coverage. Our thanks to David Ortiz for a $2 super chat. Thank you, David. D as well with a $2 super chat, asking, when do you realistically see a mission to Mars? Going to go out on a limb and assume you mean a crewed mission to Mars, since obviously we've sent a number of robotic missions over the decades. It's a hard question to answer. It sort of depends on what your level of comfort is with what a mission to Mars looks like. If you're talking about a comfortable send humans there, bring that same crew back safely, speaking only for myself, I would say we're still probably a decent ways out, partly for the technology, but also partly for the support structure needed around that type of mission. I certainly think we will get there. I think the momentum is certainly pushing towards that direction. I'd be hesitant to give you a super hard crystal ball prediction on that, though. Maybe, I'll say maybe loosely late 2040s, early 2050s. But again, that's just my very, very loose prediction on that, for whatever it's worth. Also want to thank Josh King, one of our wonderful channel members who's been with us for 25 months. Just a hair over 2 years. Good to still have you with us, Josh. Who says, always great to be a part of this channel. Go Falcon and Starship. One of our moderators and channel members, Mark Otto, gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Appreciate you, Mark. And Beverly Knuckles, another one of our great channel members, also gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Callistia Lee joining on the 10 membership bandwagon, another one of our mods. So to our 30 newest channel members, welcome aboard. We're very glad to have you all with us. And if you haven't already, be sure to thank Mark, Beverly, and Callistia on the live chat. We hope you stick around. Speaking of new channel members, Brett, Michael Howell, and Connie Hartman have all joined of their own accord with channel membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard to the three of you. We're glad to have you with us, too. Channel member Space Pony. The $2 super chat asking if we are Texas bound. I'll say, broadly speaking, our team is in Texas ahead of the launch of Starship this time around. Unfortunately, I individually am not able to make the journey. I hope to be back myself for Flight 7 when they fly their first Block 2 ship upper stage. But we do have our ace photographer, Adam Bernstein, who's down there. And, of course, we are once again partnering with the great folks over at Lab Padres. So rest assured, you'll have robust live coverage of the mission. And our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs are also Starbase bound and will be in place to help support our coverage of Starship Flight 6. So lots of pieces on the board. We're looking forward to covering that mission from tip to tail. It's going to be a busy 48 hours between now and then. I want to thank another channel member, Jacques, for $20 super chat. Appreciate that generosity, Jacques. Another channel member, Chuck Close, gifting $25 super chat. Appreciate you, Chuck. Thanks for gifting at that level. And a $100 super chat from Artemis, another one of our wonderful channel members. This trademark hype up energy message saying, hip hop, TikTok, I won't stop. Let's go. Really appreciate you supporting at that level, Artemis, and for gifting 50 Spaceflight Now memberships too. So to our newest 50 channel members, please give a big thank you to Artemis in the live chat. If you haven't already, we hope you stick around with channel membership. And SpaceX continues to exercise the full breadth of its nearly 2-hour window, as we've made another adjustment here to now 5:08 p.m. Eastern. 5:08 p.m. Eastern, that is 22:08 UTC. We've adjusted our countdown clocks. We are once again back at T-minus 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 2 seconds. Now currently T-minus 54 minutes, 21 seconds and counting. On board this Falcon 9 rocket is a spacecraft based off of all public filings and range reservations called Optus-X. You may have seen, if you went to the SpaceX launch page, though, they were referring to today's operation as the TD-7 mission. It's unclear exactly what TD-7 stands for or represents. Optus as a company is a telecommunications company that is based in Australia. It has previously launched missions on behalf of and in connection to with the Australian military. However, we very importantly need to couch this mission in the fact that we don't have super clear insight into the exact customer that Optus-X is operating for. We do know that for quite a while leading up to this mission, up until fairly recently, as I mentioned, with the range filing and other communications to the federal government here in the United States, like the Federal Communications Commission, the mission was referred to by the previous name of Optus-X. For instance, in one FCC filing, do note that Intelsat was granted special temporary authority to operate the Ka band, provide launch and early orbit phase support with the Optus-X satellite. Just to clarify, that is for just the initial checkout and operations of the satellite, not for enduring, ongoing satellite support and operations. A supporting document to that filing did state that Northrop Grumman, and I'll quote here, Northrop Grumman will serve as the mission manager. Northrop Grumman will build and send commands to the Intelsat antenna, which will process and execute the commands. Telemetry received by Intelsat will be forwarded to Northrop Grumman. We have reached out to Optus, the company, to inquire more about this mission. As of yet, we have not heard back from Optus. If we do, we'll be sure to update our web article with further information. Again, the destination for this launch heading out to a geosynchronous transfer orbit once it does leave the pad. Current launch time, again, 5:08 p.m. Eastern, 22:08 UTC. Now currently T-minus 49 minutes, 49 seconds and counting. Just a little more than 10 minutes away now, once again, from the point at which the SpaceX launch director needs to make the call on the start of propellant load for today's launch operations. If that go-ahead is given, fueling will begin at the T-minus 35-minute mark. taking a look at our chat. I want to thank Patty Chichil for a $10 super chat. Appreciate that, Patty. Good to see you this evening. He says, thank you, Spaceflight Now and mods. I would just like to say happy anniversary. 14 years since my sister Jean left this earth and is now in heaven. Miss you. It's a very kind message to your sister. I know it's always difficult to lose someone so close to you, so we'll keep you in our thoughts, Patty. Thank you for the kind message. Do have another new launch time for you. SpaceX is now targeting 5:28 p.m. Eastern. 5:28 p.m. Eastern. 22:28 UTC. Slip now basically a full hour since the original planned T0 time. We've updated our countdown clocks, now sitting back at T-minus 1 hour, 7 minutes, 40 seconds and counting. Just note for the record, as these adjustments have been made, we've not gotten word from SpaceX about the reason for the launch delay. But they do have a nearly 2-hour window within which to launch this mission today. those of you who may be just joining us now, expecting to see a launch at 4:29, SpaceX has adjusted the T0 liftoff time a couple of times since we began our live launch coverage. The current T0 right now stands at 5:28 p.m. Eastern, 5:28 p.m. Eastern. That is 22:28 UTC. In other words, T-minus 1 hour, 1 minute, 54 seconds from now. SpaceX does have a launch window that extends out to 6:27 p.m. Eastern if necessary. If SpaceX does in fact stick to this current T0 of 5:28, that will be just 1 minute after sunset, which, given the clouds that are hanging around, could be a pretty spectacular launch from a visual perspective, with the light hitting the clouds just right and maybe creating some very cool color contrast. And potential jellyfish effect as well. So much to look forward to with the now current T0 of 5:28 p.m. Eastern, 22:28 UTC. And we will cross our fingers that this most recent adjustment is the last one on deck for today. Now currently T-minus 51 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. As I mentioned, the Falcon 9 rocket, once it leaves the pad, is going to be heading off on a geosynchronous transfer orbit. So let's go ahead and give you a visual representation of what exactly that means. Falcon 9 rocket will lift off from from Launch Complex 39A. There at the Kennedy Space Center. We'll head out east over the waters of the Atlantic Ocean with the first stage booster landing on the SpaceX drone ship called A Shortfall of Gravitas. One of SpaceX's 3 drone ships in its fleet, one of 2 that's out here on the East Coast. The other one, of course, I Still Love You, is patiently waiting to catch the booster in support of the Starlink 9-12 mission out in the Pacific Ocean in the overnight hours tonight. Following stage separation and the booster landing on Shortfall of Gravitas, the second stage will continue on with the Optus-X satellite onto its final destination. According to filings with the U.S. FCC, or the Federal Communications Commission, satellite will operate at a 87.75 degrees east longitude. Following stage separation, the payload fairings will also be deployed a little bit further downrange of where the SpaceX Falcon 9 first stage lands on the drone ship. They splash down into the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under this port of parachutes, as you can see here in this image from a SpaceX presentation earlier this year. SpaceX saves about $6 million per recovery effort. So it's an important part of their business model to retrieve these and bring them onto a recovery vessel like the one you see here from a recovery effort last year. SpaceX is working to certify both its first stage boosters as well as these payload fairings for up to 40 missions. So far, the current flight leader, as far as boosters that are still flying, is B-1067, which is now launched and landed 23 times. That ties it for the number of launches for any booster with B-1061 and B-1062. However, it is the landing leader, having been the only booster in SpaceX's fleet that has successfully landed for a 23rd time. Now T-minus 47 minutes, 37 seconds and counting. Taking a quick look at our chat here. First off, I want to thank the little more than 6,000 of you who are watching with us live. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could do us a solid and hit that like button. It allows the YouTube algorithm to do its thing and bring this live launch coverage to more folks as we continue on through the count. Also want to thank channel member I Am Lita for a $5 super chat. Good to see you this evening, Lita. Who says, sharing excitement and love of space with you all is the bestest. Wholeheartedly agree. See some folks also messaging where they're watching from. Looks like Bobby TH is checking in from the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex. Did notice our Launchpad Live was up there on one of the Jumbotrons, so hopefully you've got this live stream up there now too. Maybe they've still got the multi-view showing Starbase as well, since obviously there's quite a bit of interest in Starship Flight 6 coming up on Tuesday. Let us know where you're joining us from today, whether you're here in Florida or elsewhere around the world. See plenty of Florida represented here. Got some Southern California, England, Texas, the Netherlands, Middle Tennessee, Canada, Sweden. It's always wonderful to see what a global audience we have for these missions. We appreciate you spending your evening with us here at Spaceflight now for your live launch coverage. Currently T-minus 45 minutes, 31 seconds and counting. We're a little less than 7.5 minutes away from the next round of when the SpaceX launch director needs to make the call on the start of propellant load for today's mission. As it stands right now, SpaceX is still targeting 5:28 p.m. Eastern, 5:28 p.m. Eastern, or 22:28 UTC for those around the world. If they do need to make another adjustment, they need to do so prior to the start of fueling. They have a launch window that closes today at 6:27 p.m. Eastern. Now T-minus 39 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. SpaceX still appears to be aiming towards a liftoff at 5:28 p.m. Eastern, 22:28 UTC. The call on that will be made in the next couple of minutes or thereabouts. If that go-ahead is given the T-minus 38-minute mark or right around that time, then fueling will begin T-minus 35 minutes. Now T-minus 38 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Want to thank A. Peter Aldrian for joining us the channel membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us. Also want to thank Mike's for a $5 super chat. Appreciate that, Mike. Apologies for the brief audio glitch or video glitch there. Also want to thank another one of our wonderful channel members, Mel Roberts Harold, with a $10 super chat. Good to see you this evening, Mel. Who says, from my parentheses busy Chicagoland kitchen this evening, wish I could send everyone a bowl of soup, a slice of, is it lemon pie? Yeah, I think it's a lemon emoji, and a couple of cookies for a snack later. I think you're just making all of us hungry now. It's cruising in on 5 o'clock here on the East Coast. Take a rain check on that slice of pie, though. Now T-minus 37 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. At this point, the SpaceX launch director will have made their call on the start of propellant load. Assuming they are still targeting T-minus, assuming they're targeting 5:28 p.m. Eastern for a liftoff. 22:28. Fueling is set to begin now in less than 2 minutes. We're now coming up on T-minus 35 minutes, and in just a few seconds, fueling is now underway. Assuming SpaceX is still targeting that 5:28 p.m. T0 time, which at present they appear to be. So here's what we're looking for now that presumably fueling is underway on this Falcon 9 rocket. If you see near the base of the Falcon 9 where the transporter erector starts to taper in, there's a slightly lighter gray band that runs horizontal or parallel to the ground. Right about at that point is where we start to see a frost line form as the super cold densified liquid oxygen starts flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. Given the much warmer Florida air compared to the cold LOX that will be tanking in this Falcon 9 rocket, we'll see a little bit of vapor form as well. So as we're now T-minus 33 minutes, 47 seconds and counting. Usually right about T-minus 33 minutes, or certainly by T-minus 32 minutes, we start to see some evidence of fueling. Given the relatively good lighting at this point and the fairly low heat distortion, we should have a pretty good idea if fueling is underway. Now T-minus 32 minutes, 22 seconds and counting. It is very faint. We can see a little bit of vapor on the left-hand side of the rocket from this vantage point, which does seem to indicate that fueling is underway, which does mean that SpaceX is committing to a T0 at 5:28 p.m. Eastern, 22:28 UTC, just a minute after sunset, which, given the lighting conditions, obviously we'll continue to watch the clouds, but could mean a very spectacular launch, the possibility for a jellyfish effect as the rocket ascends over Florida's Space Coast. Now currently T-minus 29 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. SpaceX is continuing its fueling of its Falcon 9 rocket, taking a wide look out here at the press lawn facing Historic Launch Complex 39A. You can see kind of a nice spread of clouds over the area. Again, this rocket is going to be lifting off from the pad just about a minute after sunset. As you can see in this zoomed-in view of the pad, fueling is well underway on this Falcon 9 rocket. Loading of RP-1, or a rocket-grade kerosene, on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. And super cold densified liquid oxygen now flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. SpaceX uses a load-and-go style of fueling for its Falcon 9 rockets, which means fueling continues pretty close until the point at which it's ready to launch this mission. Things wrap up with LOX load on the second stage, concluding about 2 minutes before liftoff. Before we see the so-called big vent as SpaceX thermally conditions the feed lines prior to second stage LOX load, let's go ahead and talk about the Falcon 9 first stage booster that is supporting this mission. Falcon 9 first stage booster that is supporting the launch of the Optus-X satellite is B-1077, looking to make its 16th flight today. So before that happens, let's go ahead and do a brief walkthrough history with this booster and talk about where it has flown before. As is the case with a number of SpaceX's boosters, it first flew in support of an astronaut mission, in this case Crew 5, which lifted off just a couple of years ago, back on October 5th of 2022. This mission to the International Space Station supported the Crew Dragon named Endurance, a distinct Dragon flight for a couple of reasons. The mission was commanded by NASA astronaut Nicole Mann, who became the first Indigenous woman to go to space. It was also the first time that a Russian cosmonaut flew to the International Space Station on board a SpaceX Dragon spacecraft. Next launch was on January 18th, 2023, with the launch of the GPS-3 Space Vehicle No. 6 satellite. The series of GPS satellites are manufactured by Lockheed Martin and nicknamed after famous explorers. SVO-6 was nicknamed Amelia Earhart. Launch number 3 came a month later on February 18th of 2023 when it launched the Inmarsat 6 F2 satellite. Inmarsat was acquired by company Viasat back in May of last year. Moving right along, fourth launch of B-1077 came on March 29th when it launched 56 satellites on the Starlink 5-10 mission. Launch number 5 happened to come on June 5th, launching another Dragon spacecraft, this time a cargo vehicle, marking SpaceX's 28th Commercial Resupply Services, or CRS, mission. This one's sending up more than 7,000 pounds of research and supplies up to the orbiting outpost. Also on board, a pair of rollout solar arrays. Launch number 6 came on August 3rd with the Galaxy 37/Horizons 4 satellite for Intelsat. This is part of the company's constellation refresh to meet FCC requirements. 7th, 8th, and 9th launches were all Starlink missions. You had Starlink 6-13 on September 1st, 6-25 on October 30th, and 6-33 on December 7th. Launch number 10 was a Northrop Grumman Cygnus spacecraft on the NG-20 mission. It's part of Northrop Grumman's Commercial Resupply Services 2 contract, same as SpaceX's with the Dragon spacecraft. That was another cargo run to the ISS. Also the first time that a Falcon 9 rocket sent up a Cygnus spacecraft. Since then, we've also seen the launch of NG-21. Looking forward to NG-22 sometime early next year, as Northrop Grumman, in partnership with Firefly Aerospace, looks forward to launching the Antares 330 rocket, which will then make way for the medium launch vehicle, or the MLV. Everything after this point was a run of Starlink missions for this booster. You had Starlink 6-43 on March 10th, 6-51 on April 17th, 6-63 on May 24th, 10-4 on July 28th, and most recently, you had Starlink 8-11 lifting off on September 5th, which of course leads up to the current mission set to lift off in 22 minutes, 46 seconds. Launch of Optus-X. We're now T-minus 21 minutes, 40 seconds and counting. In less than a minute, SpaceX will start conditioning the feed lines at the pad prior to second stage LOX load. T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds, we'll see that visually manifest as the so-called big vent. As we continue on towards that fueling milestone, I want to thank the more than 10,000 of you who are joining with us live this evening. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us. Allow some more folks to find their way into our live launch coverage as we continue on through the count. Now T-minus 20 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. You see the so-called big vent now kicking off at Launch Complex 39A. SpaceX prepares for second stage LOX load in just a hair more than 4 minutes. We're now T-minus 16 minutes, 42 seconds and counting. The big vent here should be wrapping up momentarily as SpaceX prepares for second stage LOX load. Taking a look at our live chat here, I want to thank Zachary Cohen for $5 super chat. Good to see you this evening, Zachary. And Zach says, shout out to Sophia. She is 4, and this is her first time watching a launch live. Well, a very special welcome to you, Sophia. Hope you're enjoying your time with us and should see a pretty nice launch here in just about 16 minutes. I want to thank all of those who are watching their first live launch alongside us as well. We appreciate you being with us for your commentary coverage. And we hope from whatever vantage point you're watching from that you've got a good view. And we'll be right here to support bringing you an even better one. Or at least helping to augment what you're able to see with your own eyes. Also want to thank Larry Sheehan for $2 super chats. Appreciate you, Larry. I mentioned our photographer, Adam Bernstein, is busy down at Starbase working on gathering a lot of great video and photos of the mission. Do want to share one with you right now. Pretty spectacular vantage point as the moon was rising. This will have been from last night before the other moonrise photo I posted onto X, but he's been able to get a lot of great stuff. So if you're not following him /us on X, be sure to do so. He's at ABurnNYC. And you can find Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now on X as well as Facebook and Threads. And I'll just take a moment to briefly echo the sentiments of another member of the space coverage community, Felix Spacetime on X, that a lot of folks, including us, of course, are busy working to cover the Starship launch from southern Texas. And so we implore that as you engage with our work and, of course, excited to share it, that the best way you can support those that are working hard to gather original content is by reposting or retweeting whatever site you may be on the original post, as opposed to downloading and reposting it, especially if you were to do that without giving proper credit to the original photographer or videographer or journalist. Now T-minus 12 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. Want to thank a few more folks for your support this evening. Our thanks to Greg Goes for a $2 super chat, saying Zachary from Texas with Zoe, who is 8, watching her first launch as well. Also want to thank Mandy J. Houston, excuse me, for a $5 super chat. Appreciate you, Mandy. Les joining us with channel membership at the Spacecraft Commander level. Really appreciate that, Les, for supporting us at that level. Really, channel membership helps us to do what we do here at Spaceflight now, so it's especially great to see people supporting at the higher tiers, because that makes it more accessible to a greater audience, and that's much appreciated. We'll come back to the live chat in just a minute here. Want to talk about the vehicle that's going to be launching here in just a little bit under 11 minutes, the Falcon 9 rocket. SpaceX Workhorse, which stands 70 meters or 229 feet tall, has diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Bottom two-thirds of the rocket are the Falcon 9's first stage. Today's booster has flown 15 times before, looking for launch number 16 today. Again, tail number 1077 in the SpaceX fleet. The base of the first stage are 9 Merlin 1D engines, which burn a rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs that will be used to land the first stage on the drone ship, A Shortfall of Gravitas. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core surrounded by carbon fiber. In the image on the right, you see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere, tail first, like a big old dart heading towards the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches which attach to the second stage. At first stage main engine cutoff, high pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. Also, the second stage engine nozzle is housed safely inside the inner stage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9 powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVac engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. It produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust and will be fired twice on today's flight to place the Optus-X satellite into its intended orbit. The MVac engine burns the same propellant mix, that being kerosene and liquid oxygen, same as the first stage. And at the very top of the stack are the payload fairings, which contain the Optus-X satellite. Fairing is made up of a carbon composite material and is 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall, 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. Fairing halves will be recovered a little further downrange from where the first stage lands on the drone ship. Gently splashes down into parachutes. They'll be brought back to Port Canaveral and turned over for servicing. We're seeing now beautiful coloring on the Falcon 9 rocket as the sun is beginning to set. Just note for the record that SpaceX commentator Chris Gebhardt noted that the satellite on board is, in fact, a communications satellite. A little bit more color than what had previously been noted by SpaceX in its launch page. And it's suspected, based off of the published launch timeline, they will be not showing upper stage views following the separation of the 2 stages, first and second stages. Yeah. Did hear the call for Thermal conditioning of the 9 Merlin 1D engines. That chill down involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helping protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. As you can see, the sun beginning to set. Taking a look at a slightly wider basin view of this Falcon 9 rocket, you can see a little bit more of a bluer hue around our vantage point on pad 39A. Liftoff set to take place about a minute after sunset, so should be a fairly nice ascent on this Falcon 9 rocket. Taking a brief look at our live chat here, I want to thank channel member Jersey Jen with a $2 super chat saying thank you Spaceflight Now for all you do. Thank you Jersey Jen. Matthew Joffrey with a $5 super chat saying shout out to the boys behind the NASA sign. Yeah, we do have a little bit of a crowd that are coming on down to the side of the press line here by the countdown clock. Channel member Jeff Hansen with a $5 super chat saying welcome aboard all new members and first-time visitors. Welcome, welcome. Les with a $50 super chat, one of our newest channel members. It's a shout out to Brendan, future SpaceX intern, from his supporters in Delaware. Best luck on your future ventures, Brendan. Edward Parker with a $5 super chat as we're now approaching Strongback retract. We'll start with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector will pull back about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. It stays in that position until liftoff. Want to also briefly thank Lloyd Green, channel member, with a $2 super chat. Thanks to B. Porter for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. Welcome to our newest channel member. Call for Strongback retract now underway. Take a close look from these pad views from SpaceX. See those clamp arms now opening up from the SpaceX feed. Just a quick bit of housekeeping here. You'll notice our countdown clock in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. Slightly different from what you see in the big box from the SpaceX feed. Reason for that is our countdown clock is in real time. It's coming through from SpaceX is on a slight delay, so we'll be making our call-outs based off of the real time so that they are in sync with our tracking cameras here on the ground. We're approaching the point of first stage LOX load being complete. Do have a call for stage 1 LOX load being complete. We're just now waiting stage 2 LOX load to wrap up, and fueling will have concluded. SpaceX is approaching a sunset launch of the Optus-X satellite. As we have just a couple minutes left, want to thank the nearly 25,000 of you who are with us live. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button to allow a couple more folks to find their way into our live launch coverage, as we're looking forward to a liftoff in less than 2 minutes. SpaceX commentator Chris notes that there are no issues being worked on the Falcon 9 or the payload, so we are looking good for a liftoff here in less than 2 minutes. That venting you're seeing are the ground gas closeouts as they are purging the remaining locks from the feed lines. As we come into the final minute before liftoff, we're going to go ahead and keep our focus on the Falcon 9 rocket. We'll come back to the live chat on the other side of liftoff. The call of the Falcon 9 is in startup, and we are now just waiting for the SpaceX launch director to give their go for launch. And we do have that confirmation that SpaceX is go for launch. Now less than 30 seconds to lift off. 20 seconds. 15 seconds. And here we go in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the Optus-X mission. The Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. Good liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket. The vehicle now traveling faster than the speed of sound. Rocket is passing through max Q, or the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Got that call from max Q. Coming up next is a sequence of events in fairly rapid succession. First, we'll have first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, at about 2.5 minutes after liftoff. That'll be followed seconds later by stage separation, followed by the ignition of the second stage engine, and then the fairings will separate about 3.5 minutes after launch. Now T plus 2 minutes 41 seconds to flight in real time, 2:30 on the SpaceX feed. We're coming up on MECO.
MECO. Stage separation confirmed. And back ignition.
And as a reminder, at the request of the customer here, there will not be second stage views of the Falcon 9 rocket. The hypersonic grid fins now being deployed on the Falcon 9 first stage booster as it is making its way towards the drone ship, A Shortfall of Gravitas. SpaceX still providing telemetry views for the second stage, even though second stage views are not being provided again at the request of the customer today. Call for fairing separation from SpaceX. Now coming up on the 4th minute into flight. Those fairing halves again will splash down in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under the support of parachutes. Call from SpaceX that the first and second stages are both following nominal trajectories. Now a little more than 4.5 minutes into this mission, it appears the first stage has reached its apogee just now at 120 kilometers in altitude. The booster will now begin to make its way back down towards the drone ship. Those puffs you're seeing periodically in between the grid fins, those are the cold gas thrusters helping to adjust the attitude or the positioning of the first stage booster. Now 5.5 minutes into flight in real time, 5:22 on the SpaceX feed. Coming up at T plus 6 minutes and 15 seconds is when the first stage entry burn will begin. Call it both the first and second stages still following a nominal trajectory. Coming upon the start of that first stage entry burn. You see that entry burn underway. It'll last a little more than 20 seconds in total. With the conclusion of the first stage entry burn, we're now looking for the start of the landing burn at about T plus 8 minutes and 23 seconds, setting up a first stage landing about T plus 8 minutes and 48 seconds. Falcon 9 first stage booster now traveling below the speed of sound. Coming up on the 8th minute into flight. Based off of the SpaceX feed, we're about 20 seconds away from the landing burn beginning. Landing burn underway.
Stage 1, landing confirmed.
And with a good call out, you can see first stage booster landed for a 16th time. Also note that this was the 369th booster landing to date. And again, because SpaceX has been requested to not provide upper stage views of the Falcon 9 rocket and the payload on board, SpaceX will be wrapping up its live telemetry view momentarily, but we'll give you this view of it as long as it is possible. With an empty pad, we've had a successful liftoff and booster landing with this flight, so we're going to go ahead and turn to our booster history in just a moment, but do want to remind you that this begins our really big live launch coverage sprint, as in the overnight hours we do have a launch lifting off from Space Launch Complex 4 East, a batch of Starlink satellites. Another launch from here at the Cape tomorrow evening, and then Tuesday, liftoff planned for the big rocket you see there on your screen, nearly 400 feet tall Starship rocket, looking for Flight 6, coming up as soon as Tuesday, November 19th at 4 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2200 UTC for those joining from around the world. And we hope you join us for as much of these missions as you're able to. Again, Starlink tonight, mission for India tomorrow, and then Starship capping it off on Tuesday evening or early afternoon. We'll be partnering once again with our friends at Lab Padre, who are bringing us these live pictures right now. So if you're not already subscribed to both Spaceflight Now and Lab Padre, now is a good time to do so. We look forward to seeing you back here for that coverage then. We're not quite done with our live launch coverage on this mission, so I want to thank a few more folks in the live chat before we turn to our mission stats as they currently stand. I want to thank Edward Parker, the $5 super chat, saying watching always from Houston, Texas area. Thank you, Edward. Lloyd Green, one of our wonderful channel members, with a $2 super chat. Thank you, Lloyd. B. Porter, another one of our channel members, gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. Appreciate that, B. To our newest channel member, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank B in the live chat. And we hope you stick around with channel membership. Sue Ramsden, saying shout out to all ham or radio hams watching. The £2 super chat there. Licia, one of our wonderful channel members, with a $5 super chat, saying this super chat actually is from Bob. Appreciate Space Pony with a $2 super chat there. Charles Briggs gifting 20 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that generosity, Charles. To our newest 20 channel members from Charles, welcome aboard to all of you. We're glad to have you with us. Be sure to thank Charles in the live chat if you haven't already. Chrissy Matthews with a $3 super chat. Thank you, Chrissy. And we have Chris Space E, one of our channel members, who's marking 3 months with us, who says, thanks for all those who make this possible. I'll throw that thanks back to our channel member community, since it's y'all that really help support this venture we have here. Jean Marquis, also been a member for 3 months. Good to still have you with us. Patty Chichil with another $5 super chat saying thanks again, Spaceflight Now and mods, and everyone in the live chat for your condolences and kindness. And as our thoughts are still with you, Patty, today. Callistia Lee, one of our wonderful channel members and moderators here for Spaceflight Now, saying if you haven't already, please show the team some love and support by clicking the like button. They work hard to bring these live streams to us. I will echo that sentiment that hitting the like button is a great way to support, since for those who are not able to be with us live for this mission, helps boost the visibility on this and bring this live coverage to folks who may want to check it on a rewatch or see it for the first time, sort of a TiVo kind of sense. And thanks for that being a $20 super chat, Callistia. Very generous of you. Last but not least, I want to thank Matt Crowder for a $10 super chat. Some support tonight. Thank you, Matt. With that, let's go ahead and turn to our mission stats as they currently stand, with a good liftoff and landing of the Falcon 9 first stage booster B-1077 that capped off its 16th flight. This marked SpaceX's 396th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 111th Falcon 9 of 2024. This was SpaceX's 341st Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. With 2 Falcon Heavy missions on the calendar this year, this was SpaceX's 113th orbital launch. It also marked the 125th orbital launch within the last 365 days. 216th orbital launch from actually 216th launch from Pad 40 will be coming up in tomorrow after the launch for India. This was actually the 93rd orbital launch from Pad 39A for SpaceX, and the 187th orbital launch from that pad to date. Moving on to the bar chart here. Here's where things currently stand following this launch today. With some recovery stats, this was the 85th booster landing on the drone ship A Shortfall of Gravitas, the 290th SpaceX drone ship landing, and their 369th overall booster landing to date. Finally, with some industry stats, this was the 80th launch from Florida so far this year, the 120th from U.S. soil, the 131st from U.S. Rocket Company, and the 215th orbital launch from around the world. 6 mishaps so far on the year. Here's where the pie chart currently stands. The U.S. still holding 61% of the pie. China, with its 56 launches, having 26%. Once again, just want to put out the reminder for folks that the launch of Starlink 9-12 from Vandenberg Space Force Base set to lift off at 9:47 p.m. Pacific. That's 12:47 a.m. Eastern, or 05:47 UTC. So for all of our West Coast-based space fans, hope you're able to join us for our live launch coverage of that mission, which will begin 30 minutes prior to liftoff. And then right back here tomorrow, just a hair after lunchtime, we'll have the liftoff of the GSAT N2, otherwise known as the GSAT-20 mission, on behalf of the Indian Space Research Organization, or ISRO. It's another geostationary transfer orbit type mission, this time with India's geosynchronous satellite, or GSAT, satellite on board. So for all of you who have been with us, we appreciate your time this evening. We'll look forward to seeing you back here in the, well, here on the East Coast overnight hours later in the evening for those on the West Coast. Want to thank our moderators, Callistia Lee, Astro Jen, Astro Joe, Mark Otto, for joining us here in the live chat today. Appreciate all of you. Big thanks to our channel member community. Our thanks to our friend P. Carsons with Max Q Productions, who unfortunately got snuffed by the clouds from his vantage point, which just, it's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. We appreciate Pete being on standby in support for today's operation. Big thanks to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast. Shout to Adam Bernstein, who, while not physically here, has been running around Starbase doing plenty of work out that way. Most importantly, thanks to you for wherever you're watching from, whether here in Florida or elsewhere around the world. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.